If you like this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, your name can appear at the beginning of this and many other upcoming videos.
You don't understand, Spike. I have a perfect library book return record. Had a perfect record.
Oh! Boy, am I late to this one. I guess that's what happens when you fangasm over Endgame and torture yourself with critical mode. Well, it's time to get back on track with the point of no return. In this episode, Twilight finds out that she has an overdue library book from all the way back to the beginning of the series. She goes with Spike back to the library to return it, only to find out that because of how overdue it was, she might have gotten the old librarian fired. They travel across Equestria to find the librarian named Dusty Page, only to find her having the time of her life at a local retirement home. So now that they found her, will Twilight be able to make up with her and get her job back? Or does Dusty even want her job back? And I think this is where the episode gets interesting. Something to take away from this episode is that it's definitely a Mending Fences 2.0, taking a minimal event from the pilot and making an episode about it. And while this episode isn't as good as a Mending Fences, it still handles its concept in an interesting way. You'd think that simply trying to return an overdue library book would be a really mundane idea for a story, but they managed to make a lot of fun out of it. It shows how you don't need a big battle or a grand epic quest to tell a good story, just something small and down to earth. I'm really glad that Season 9 isn't just a bunch of build-up with the Battle of Grogar and is instead taking its time by giving these characters more fun and lighthearted adventures. It's something different that ends on a note that feels real, and it allows the world to feel more immersive. And that's actually the appeal to this episode. It has a low-key slice-of-life tone that takes a simple idea and plays straight with it, while keeping the characters consistent. Some people have wrongfully criticized this episode as just being another Twilight freakout episode, but what helps to make it work here is that it takes a different approach to the concept. Her motivations in this episode are very different compared to Lesson 0 and A Royal Problem. In this episode, she emphasizes that the important thing was getting her friend's job back and how the late fees and perfect record weren't the top priority. Neither of these things was as important as seeing the right thing being done by her librarian friend. This is actually a pretty smart portrayal of Twilight's characteristics, taking her anxiety and molding it into an example of taking responsibility for your mistakes. She goes through all this trouble not to fix a perfect record, but to right a wrong that she thought she committed. Twilight is prone to overreacting, so it's in character for her to go through all this trouble, but Dusty takes a moment to help Twilight settle down and relax, explaining how not getting the book returned on time actually changed her life for the best. She used to do everything in her power to hold on to her perfect record, but after she lost it, she was free to look into other possibilities. The way she sums up losing that record as finding freedom shows how trying to keep it was like a little prison of her own making. Now she can explore other interests and partake in other hobbies, and seeing her doing all these other things is a lot of fun. She has a really active and energetic personality, practically thriving in the new life that she's had since leaving the library. She explains how her obsession with perfection was a flaw in her personality, and after accepting that perfection is an impossible pursuit, she eases down and takes more risks, exploring new boundaries that lead her to trying new things. It's a really smart way to teach people that while you should strive to do your best, you also need to accept that things won't be perfect. And it's a really important lesson for Twilight to learn as a future ruler of Equestria. She was mainly stressing about not letting people down, which is understandable since it's a high-stakes responsibility. But she needs to know that not everything is going to work out and you need to think about what to do when that happens. And because of how good the pacing is and how the concept is executed so well, the episode is able to set up this moral in a really relevant way. We go through life expecting things to be perfect despite that it isn't guaranteed. But it's not always going to be that way, and we should learn to take what we can with a grain of salt. This is a really good lesson that can be applied to any person of any age. And it's really impressive seeing how even in its final season, the show still manages to resonate life lessons that can be shared between kids and adults alike. And there's also some other good elements in the episode too. I really love Spike in this episode. I've actually been loving Spike a lot lately. The last several seasons have been really good to his character, and we see how all of his growth is really showing here. He has such a great deadpan response to all of Twilight's nonsense, but also acts as a loyal companion to help her, helping her calm down and keeping her from losing control over herself. He's seen Twilight do this so much that he has enough experience to handle this situation in an effective manner. Even when returning the book, he doesn't throw Twilight under the bus by saying she forgot to return it. Rather, he says we forgot to return it. It's a small moment of dialogue, but a huge amount of detail that strongly highlights how much love and loyalty he has for Twilight. It's so sweet and generous of him to do that, and it's a great piece of writing. I also like the scene he has in the restaurant pretending to be the waiter. It shows how he's highly adaptable to a new situation and is also very well versed in culinary culture. Not to mention, the dynamic between him and Twilight is handled very well. We don't often get episodes that feature just the two of them working off each other, and their chemistry is handled very well in this episode. They perfectly balance each other out, and there's even times in the episode where Twilight actually listens to what he's telling her. He comes across as an effective voice of reason because it influences Twilight's actions and behavior in the story. Even if she still gets anxious, she also acknowledges what he's telling her and follows it through. If you were to take the way they interact in this episode and compare it to how they interact in earlier episodes, especially the first season, there's a huge difference, really showing just how far they've come and how strongly their relationship has grown over the course of the series. Just making this episode mostly about Twilight and Spike was a great idea, as it allows the writers to remain more focused and not feel overwhelmed with a wider cast, making their interactions a huge highlight in the episode. There's even a returning cameo from Moon Dancer. Even if she doesn't really do much, it was still nice to see her in the episode, and it further supports the idea of this being a Mending Fences 2.0. It's nice to see that she's actually making friends and that her character development actually stuck in that episode. There's also a nice parallel in the scene as Twilight tells Spike she used to have lunch with Dusty Pages while she was still in the library. Now here's Moon Dancer having regular lunch meetings with one of the new librarians. It really shows just how sort of alike she and Twilight actually were, as in more than just their character models swapping colors. The Point of No Return is a really good example of how less is more. I really love how this series is staying true to the core of the series, just allowing the characters to focus on building relationships and interact with each other. The characters are great, the moral is handled in a relevant way, the story is well paced, and it manages to have a lot of fun with a really simple idea. With this episode, Season 9 continues to deliver, and I can't wait to see what happens next. So until next time, take care of yourselves and stay awesome. This is Map signing out.